Welcome everyone to the career Q&A with Techire and myself, Hillary Black, in conversation designer jobs. For today's agenda, we are going to share a little bit about ourselves, get to the questions that you all sent in ahead of time, and then we're going to answer more questions if we have time. Hopefully we have time. Just to quickly introduce myself, I'm not going to be doing a lot of the talking today. I'm going to leave that to our experts. But my name is Hillary Black, and I describe myself as one part brand marketing, one part chatbots, 100% pink. If you're connected to me on LinkedIn, you know that everything that I do pretty much is pink. It's my favorite color, love it. And I work, teach, and create in the conversational AI industry. I have a community that is called Conversation Designers Internet Club, and I am also the founder of conversationdesignerjobs.com, which is a job board that is specifically created for conversation designers and for opportunities in conversation design. I also am a marketer who helps writers, creatives, and entrepreneurs build authority online. And I am the head of conversation design and marketing at Mav, which is a company that I also co-founded. And we have an automated SMS assistant to help fintech companies convert more leads. And with that, I will leave it to Alice.
You familiar names already in the participant list, so it's great to see you all here. Yeah, pretty much I am what I am, a conversational AI recruiter. We focus purely on conversational AI across technical roles and also on the design side too. So conversation design is a big focus of ours. So we really try and do as much as we can to help people get into this space and try and give as much as advice and tips as we can. So yeah, that's a bit about me.
Awesome. I can hear you now. Technical difficulties, and Leigh, I'll allow you to introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so my name's Leigh, or Smithy, or even Right On Dude on Instagram. That's my screenwriting alias. Been trying to crack into the film industry for about 20 years. So if anybody wants to chat offline about film, you can find me there. Joined Techire probably about 7-8 weeks ago now as a conversational AI recruiter. So I'm focused on finding the very best talent in conversational AI for tech startups in US and Canada. And I also just started a room on Clubhouse called Cup of Tea with Joe, Julia, and Lee, which runs every Thursday, where we talk to various folks across the industry about personal passion projects that they're working on. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys both for being here today. Yeah, make sure to join the Clubhouse room. It's happening later today. I see Julia in the chat. So with that, let's get into your questions. So this is all going to be geared around people who are looking for maybe their first or their second job in conversational design. You might be trying to break into the industry. You might be coming from UX writing or something like that. You might just be a fan of the field and want to get into it. And you might be looking for an entry-level job. You could be a more senior person, but we're going to focus around landing your first job. So our first question is for Leigh. What would you say is the most important aspect to showcase throughout your portfolio? And this is a question from Adam.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you for the question, Adam. It's a great question, and I think from my experience in talking to people in the industry and listening to what hiring managers are really looking for in terms of your portfolio, it's to demonstrate the full scope of your projects, not just one. If you have 2, 3, 4, they really want to see the uniqueness of each story, each journey that you're trying to create, and they want to see your creative process really broken down into different phases, starting with why you actually focused on that project and what problem it's actually solving, what you then accomplished with that project, your approach, how long it took, and if you collaborated with anybody else, what specifically was your role within that project, and what tools did you use to bring the project to life. And then ultimately, once you've gone through all those kind of steps, people, hiring managers, they want to see the end product, which might be your chatbot or your voice bot or whatever, and actually see it in action.
Awesome. Next question, Leigh, this is also for you. Do I need to code in order to start a career as a conversation designer? Can I be a conversation designer with low or no code tools? And if so, which ones are the best? And this is actually a question we received from several people. Victoria was one of them. Someone submitted anonymously, and I got another question last night actually about this. So this is a very hot topic for people, and I definitely have a lot to say about it too.
Okay, awesome. Well, yeah, thank you, Victoria, for the question. So my answer to the first part is no. You don't need to code or even come from a technical background in order to, get a career as a conversation designer. I'm not from a technical background, and I don't have a technical mind at all, but I have a vested interest in conversation design. There's some fantastic tools out there. I think the go-to ones seem to be voice flow and maybe dialogue flow. And then there are some additional tools that maybe Hillary wants to touch upon, but I have some personal projects that I'm going to kick off soon. So no, you don't have to have a technical background. You don't even have to be technical minded. If you're passionate and you've got this insatiable curiosity to want to learn, just get out there and build something.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will echo the same thing. I don't know how to code. I couldn't even get my live stream set up. So that says what my technical expertise is to all of you. But I think that while it's definitely something that I see a lot of job postings wanting these types of skills, a lot of times they're wanting you to kind of just be familiar with it, and they want you to be familiar with the different tools and just sort of know how to speak that language. But I think in a lot of projects, and honestly most of them, like I work in a startup where I'm the only conversation designer, and we have a technical person who's responsible for developing all of these experiences. And that's going to be the case at, I would say, 99% of companies, is that you're going to be collaborating with a technology team. But it is something that if you are interested and you have, a desire to learn how to code, it's a good way to set yourself apart as a conversation designer. If you want to learn a little bit about dialogue flow, if you want to get familiar with how to, train AI models, that's something that is always going to be, good for you. But at the same point, it's something that, it's not a requirement, I would say. Do you agree, Alice?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you touched on a good point there about like typically you won't need to be technical because there are so many platforms out there that require you not to be. They're designed mostly with that in mind. However, you will be working with technical people, so you don't have to be able to talk about Java or whatever in detail, but being able to understand a bit of the lingo perhaps, or just be able to communicate with people that are technical. For anyone that maybe has worked with engineers and stuff, being able to just communicate with them, because they are usually very technical. So just having that understanding definitely helps. But yeah, like I rarely see that a company will require you to have technical or be able to code, for example. Like if you do, then great, it's a bonus, but typically like it's not an absolute must.
Yeah, totally agree. Okay, next question. And this is a popular one, I think, for all recruiters probably too. All the time I receive rejections and zero feedback. So this could be both from your interview or from like a take-home assignment. How can I understand what I'm doing right and what I need to improve?
Yeah, so this one is pretty general, like with regards to not just being specific to conversation design. Unfortunately, this does happen a lot, and it is it's not right. Like us as recruiters, we always make sure our clients give feedback at every point of the process, from CV feedback, from in every single interview, because how can someone improve or know maybe what to do differently if they don't know where they went wrong perhaps. Or so I think that feedback should always be given, but unfortunately that's not always the case. So really it's hard to really say what to understand it, what you're doing right, if you don't know. I think like try and follow up if you can. Maybe if you've got different points of contact, maybe like if, for example, at interview stage there are a few different people on the panel, and maybe you have their details, like try and contact each of them if you failed like with the main point of contact, just to try and try and get an answer. But yeah, it's unfortunately there's not really an answer to give in terms of, it should be standard practice, but unfortunately it's not. So yeah, I would just try and say follow up as much as you can. Obviously, like any feedback's good feedback. We do say to clients to, it doesn't have to be paragraphs full, but just something to give someone in terms of maybe what they could do better next time would definitely help. And even just interviews in general are good practice for people, especially if maybe it's your first job in general, or it's a new area. Say for example, you've had a interview for a conversation design role and it's your first go at it, like just that practice alone is good for you to take away. So there will be some things you can take away if you don't get feedback, which obviously isn't right, and hopefully you should get a feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely have been ghosted by quite a few people in my previous experiences. It's like the worst thing because you have no idea if you did anything wrong, or if they've hired someone else, or if they just forgot about you.
Yeah, I think we've all been there, which, it shouldn't be that way, but unfortunately it is.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, next question. And I actually see a message in the Q&A about this as well. Where can I find entry-level positions in conversation design? How should I market myself as someone who doesn't have actual experience? And I think both of you have a lot to say about both of these things.
Yeah, so I'll take the first part of the question. And shameless plug here, but you can obviously go to our website, Techire.ai, and you'll find some great positions advertised there. Obviously, Hillary as well. She's built a jobs board specifically to promote conversation design jobs. So great, two great places to start.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, beyond that, I would just punch in, Boolean or keyword searches into Google and LinkedIn and see what that pulls up. And then the other piece of advice I have is just immerse yourself in the community. Become an integral part of the Global Voice community, which is a pretty special community. Expand your network as widely as possible. And then as you start to do these things and you start to connect with the various folks in the industry, especially influencers, you'll see that people post jobs specifically on LinkedIn. So you'll be more exposed to opportunities as and when they arise within the space.
Yeah. For sure. And I think too that like LinkedIn is a great way to just like network with other people and get to know people, and that the community is like, I'm sure we can all agree with this, that the community is so incredibly welcoming as a way to like get introduced to new companies.
Yeah, 100%. I've not experienced that before. Even when I worked in the DevOps space, I was a part of the community there, but I've not experienced anything like this, which is, it's just really refreshing.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, Alice?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that just sort of echoing what you both said, like everyone's like so willing to share information and things, and that comes with opportunities too. So a lot of the time you might come across something that's literally word of mouth. Someone might recommend you or might reach out to you and say, I know this person or I know this company are hiring for so-and-so. So like networking, I would say, is super important, and just make sure you're like, getting yourself out in all the different channels. Like there's many different channels or communities, like specific communities in different areas that you can get involved with, and there's always opportunities being shared. So
yeah, and that also is kind of plays into having like some sort of personal brand or like presence on both like LinkedIn, and I think Twitter is another good place for this community. Just sharing sort of like your opinions and what you think is a really good way to start conversations with people that are a lot more authentic, as opposed to being like, how can I get a job? It's sort of, you are showing that you have an interest in this and you have a desire to know about this, or you're trying things on your own. And even though you don't have that job experience on your resume, you're creating experience for yourself.
Yeah, that basically, goes into the next part of the thing about marketing yourself, like building your own personal brand. Like when you say that, some people go like, oh my God, that's like, that's a lot of work. it's quite simple when you break it down. Like, it's just about engaging with people and not just like taking things from the community. It's also about giving back. It's actually more important to give than, you know, expect to take back. So the more you give just because you want to and it's genuine, like, you'll just find people come to you, or things will come to your way. So like, in terms of marketing yourself with actually no conversation design, like, personal branding is a massive one that you can do, like putting yourself out there, giving back to the community. Like, you don't have to be an expert, you know, we're not saying like go and design a free, you know, chatbot for someone, but like, you know, give your opinion, give your feedback, speak to people. You know, so much you can do without having that experience. Another thing I would say as well is, in terms of like marketing yourself, so maybe more focused around like when you're applying for jobs, and maybe, you know, you're applying for a conversation design role, but you don't actually have any experience, and the likelihood is it's probably going to say on the job spec you need some experience because typically, you know, that's what it's going to say. The thing is, you shouldn't be put off by applying for a job. Obviously, if it specifically says, you know, we're looking for a senior conversation designer and you've got no experience, you know, it's probably not a right fit. If you can demonstrate like your soft skills and transferable skills, these are like the key things. So I speak to so many people who say like, oh, I've come from a customer service background, or, you know, I've been working in a restaurant, or, you know, it's got nothing to do with conversation design. And I'm like, yes, but you need to think outside the box. Like, there's actually so many things that you would have done in your time as a, I don't know, customer assistant or whatever it was, that you can relate that to conversation design, like dealing with customers, understanding the customer journey, especially if, I don't know, if it's in retail, for example, and you might be working on projects as a conversation designer for companies in retail. So you've straight away, you've got knowledge of the industry and what customers typically want to know. Also, and I know Leigh touched on a good point when we were sort of discussing this previously, about like you're used to like speaking to a wide variety of people as well, and like different customers, which I think is super important, because when you're designing for conversation design, like you don't know who you're designing it for. Like, well, obviously, you know, you've got an idea of who the customers will be, but you don't know them as individuals. So, you know, you have to have such an open mind with it in terms of like the audience and stuff. So again, like just using customer service as an example, the chances are you've probably come across or dealt with customers from a wide background, or, you know, diverse background. So like there's loads of things that you can focus on, but I think sometimes it, like the thought of it, you know, it's like, oh, I come from a complete different background, but when you strip it all back, there's so many things that you can relate into this. And when you're marketing yourself in a conversation design role, you need to really like emphasize those points, not just be like on your CV, oh, I've worked in a restaurant for the last 2 years, and not give any relevance to conversation design. Like, make sure it's relevant. I don't know if you've got anything to add there.
Yeah, no, I just love that. I love thinking about ways to sort of think about all of the roles that you have had previously and what skills can be applied, as opposed to just like what your title was. I think that, you know, there's never going to be kind of like the perfect background and title, but it's all about just looking at what are the tools that you have to use in order to make you a better conversation designer, and to just make you a better, you know, person to work with someone on a team. There's a lot of things that go into having a role aside from just, I have 5 years of experience in conversation design. You know, there's so much that goes into working at a company.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, like if you can demonstrate you're a strong team player, and that's important to the company you're applying for. Maybe they've got a very strong team culture, for example, or company culture. A lot of companies do value that nowadays. Like, you know, someone could have a lot of experience in conversation design, but maybe they're not quite the right culture or team fit, you know, for that company. So if maybe you are and you've got less experience, then, you know, you're still in the chances of getting that job, because that could be, you know, they can teach you the rest essentially, but you can't change who someone is.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we also had a few questions about this from different countries, but someone had written in from India and said they don't see many voice opportunities here. It is a fascinating world. How can I grow into this space? I would love to have your ideas on what someone could do.
Yeah, so I think we've already talked about this a little bit. Maybe there was a little bit of crossover from the last question. The voice community is a global community, and it is a very inspiring and empowering community where everybody wants to support one another in their goals. So my suggestion would be to kind of immerse yourself in that community, join as many webinars, virtual events, meetups, listen to as many podcasts, read as many blogs and watch as many YouTube videos as you can, just so you can absorb as much information as you can and understand this world a bit better than maybe you do at the start of your journey. And then, like Alice said, with regards to the last question, work out how you can very selflessly give back to that community, find out what maybe is missing from that community, and then add value by creating a space of your own and value in whatever content that might look like. And then what you'll find is, instead of you trying to search for opportunities, they will find you because you've immersed yourself in that world, you've expanded your network, and then you've grown a space of your own, which is adding value to that overall community. So people will come and speak with you, and opportunities will find you.
Yeah, and I see someone wrote in the chat that there's a Voice Lunch India. And so that's a good place to start. And I think there are a few communities that will be based in India or just that are global. I mean, I know that like Women in Voice is a global organization. They allow members to be from anywhere. And then I would also do research into which companies are in your country that are building experiences. I know that Haptic actually is based in India. And so that's one place you could start. And I'm sure there's a lot of, agencies and just other companies that are using this type of technology that might be hiring, or you could just reach out and say, I'm very interested in this. If you guys are ever having a meetup, let me know, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay, this kind of goes into marketing yourself as well. So how do you frame UX writing, content strategy, film, fine arts, or other storytelling backgrounds in interviews and or portfolio if you do not have actual experience in chatbot or voice design?
So yeah, this is a really great question. And when you shared the slides of this before the webinar, Hillary, this is one that kind of threw me a little, and I had to kind of take a step back and think about my own personal experience and journey, and speaking with Alice. It kind of made a lot of sense to me. So as I said at the start of this webinar, I've been trying to break into the movie industry for close to 20 years. So I have a deep love for screenwriting. So if you have that same kind of passion, and you come from a storytelling background, whether it be in film or TV or whatever it may be, like, a lot of the information I've absorbed, Kathy Pearl talks about how sample dialogues are like movie scripts, how it's like two characters doing a back and forth. So you might not have, designed a chatbot or a voice bot, but if you've written a script, you can take maybe a section, an excerpt of your script from the two main characters where there's back and forth dialogue, and then frame it in a way that it looks like, or present it in a way that it looks like sample dialogue. And then you're starting to form a portfolio where it demonstrates your skills, your experience are transferable to conversation design. And that's how I would start to frame your experience in UX writing, content strategy, film, finance, and storytelling into this new world that you want to become a part of.
And I would also say that you can use that experience to create experiences that you can share. So you can create prototypes, or you can create mock-ups that you can share that are going to illustrate all of these things. Or maybe it's even, a portfolio bot that's about yourself. Like, there's a lot of creative ways that you can experiment, and you can show your approach to how you would work on a project like this.
Yeah, I agree. I think that we get this question a lot in terms of, I've not done this before. I've not designed a chatbot or a voice application, but how do I make a portfolio? And the truth is, you don't have to have been part or made an application that's out there to put that on your portfolio. Do a passion project, have a go. Even I've gone on VoiceFlow and tried to do something. Yes, it didn't work out very well, but if I kept it, I probably could have. And I could put that on a portfolio. Anyone can create it, and there's a lot of tools and things like that to create a portfolio, so it doesn't need to be like loads of effort. There's templates and stuff out there, but the truth is that you can do something. And I think for a company that's hiring, and for someone that hasn't got conversation design experience, but they can see that you've actually done something in your spare time, you've gone to that extra effort and took that extra step to make something that you can show. Maybe you haven't got the final thing to show, but you can show your thought process, because to me that's the most important thing. That's amazing. So yeah, you don't necessarily have to have done it before to put it on there.
Yeah, and that's totally true. And I see in the Q&A here, we have a semi-related question, since we're talking so much about portfolios. Do recruiters and hiring managers actually read the full portfolio, or do they just skim it? And this is probably unique to the person, but I'd be interested to hear what both of you have to say.
Yeah.
Oh, do you want to go, Leigh?
Okay, yeah, I can go first. I would say that hiring managers probably skim it, in all honesty, right? They've got every intention to to read it, but if it doesn't grab their attention, if you're not talking about your thought process and what problem you solved and what you've accomplished from solving that problem, they'll naturally lose interest, and then they'll skip over that project and move on to the next one. And then if all of your projects, case studies are kind of written in the same way and presented in the same way, then yeah, as I said, they'll probably just skim through it. It's got to be attention grabbing. It's got to talk about what was your rationale, your logic for designing this chatbot and voice bot, and what's the value that what's the problem that you solved with this chatbot. And if it doesn't do that, then yeah, you're just going to get hiring managers to skim through it.
Yeah, I think that it's getting a good balance, because I've said this loads of times in terms of CVs, like literally recruiters or hiring managers spend about, I think on average, 6 to 7 seconds looking at it. So it's the same for your CV and your portfolio. Like, you need to make sure that if your CV has lost interest, the likelihood of them then going onto your portfolio, it may be unlikely if it's not grab their attention that much. So you need to make sure they're engaged on your CV first and foremost, and then make them want to go on to read your portfolio. So don't overload your CV, keep it fairly simple, but put enough stuff in there, and then use your portfolio to go into a lot more detail. Like, I always say go into a lot more detail on your portfolio, but then you almost don't want to do pages and pages and pages of just one project, because hiring managers are going to have multiple profiles to look through. They haven't really got time to sit there and spend hours looking at things. So try and keep it precise, straight to the point. But yeah, it needs to be engaging enough for them to look through. But I agree with Leigh, they'll probably skim through it. If you get through into their formal process, the likelihood is they'll probably go back onto your portfolio and go things in a lot more detail anyway, and maybe look at a few things that you've created. But initially, yeah, they'll probably skim it.
Yeah, so I think that is, we had a follow-up question from earlier of the portfolio and your resume are the two most crucial things to actually get you in the door. And so regardless of what skills you have, you want to make sure that all of you are sort of revisiting both your portfolio and your resume to make sure that it's communicating these things at a very quick glance. And of course, you can have more and more details, but I think the key is to kind of make it engaging from the get-go, so that you are making them pause a little bit and say, I'm going to take a deeper look at this.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, next question. Another portfolio question and background question. So for internships, so this is when you're, applying for jobs that they are not expecting you to have experience. So if your internship, if you are lucky enough to kind of find one, there's not a lot of them out there. But I do know that Facebook has an internship program specifically around the conversation design team. So from an internship perspective, what does an ideal background for a conversation designer look like?
Okay, so I'm going to focus on the ideal background rather than portfolio, because we kind of touched upon that already. But I think from what I've learned from being in this industry for, for 2 months, and the people I've talked to, there's no ideal background for a conversation designer. Most folks I've talked to, they come from such a diverse background that, it'd be really hard to say that this particular, background experience is what folks, are looking for. I think it's about showing your passion, your individualism, and your desire to learn, and then customizing and personalizing what you've learned on your journey so far, whatever that may look like, and how that transfers to conversation design, and then framing it and positioning it in a way that puts you in a really good light.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, next question. As a recruiter, what would you prefer to see? A real voice bot or chat bot? So to say the app's external behavior, or a functional prototype and the analysis behind it. So this is kind of like, do you want to just see the real thing to see how it works? Or do you want to see the actual prototype and the approach?
Yeah, I would say, and it sort of like crosses over of what I mentioned already with the portfolio, because typically you would show this in a portfolio, or you may discuss it in an interview or whatever. But like, it goes back to like, from what I personally see in this space, I think like the process is very, very important. Like, if you show like the end product, the shiny thing that they can play with and have a look around, like that's great, like, because they can see it in action. But then there's probably going to be loads of questions still, like, well, how did you even do it? Like, there's so much to get to that point. So I think that it's not like a deal breaker to have something, an end product to be able to show or showcase. Personally, I don't think. I think that your thought process and everything in between, and the analysis, as mentioned, is probably the most key thing. And great if you've got something to show at the end, but that's not the most important thing, I would say.
Yeah, and like, speaking so much of portfolios, I'm going to drop in the chat. Alice and I both did portfolio review blog posts with BotMock, one that's about voice portfolios and one about chatbot portfolios. So I think that will be super helpful as you sort of are getting ideas. Just, it's really helpful, I think, to see what other people are doing too. And so you can just get inspiration about that, and hear a little bit of what we had to say in terms of reviewing these portfolios, because that's not something that you would otherwise have.
Yeah, Julia Anderson on that point turned me on to a great website called bestfolios.com, which showcases some really good portfolios where you can get some tips and tricks from.
Yeah, and I see that EJ also dropped a link to a Google UX article that is showing portfolio tips. And so there's a lot of info out there if you want to just kind of get an idea of what you can do, especially if you don't have a portfolio. I personally don't have one, but I'm not currently looking for a job. But it's something that you can kind of just think about. It takes quite a bit of time to gather everything together. And I will say with that too, if you are working on any projects right now, make sure that you take screenshots of everything and take video recordings of things, because projects that you do may not last forever. And so you want to make sure that you are capturing both the before and the after, because those are things that you're not really thinking of in the moment that you want to really, really make sure that you get. Okay. And we have a question about this in the chat as well. And this kind of goes into someone saying that they didn't see a lot of opportunities in their country. So how likely is it to be hired as a conversation designer if English is not your native language? So in Latin America, there's a few positions similar to how there were in India. So it's really difficult to get a job, unlike in the US and Europe, where there's a ton of opportunities. I'm concerned about the language and how proficient I must be.
Okay, so yeah, I'll take this one, and I think it's a great question by Sophia, if I pronounced the name correctly. Yeah. And I think I would look at this a slightly different way. I think if you're bilingual or multilingual, I think you're in a really advantageous position. And yes, jobs that are advertised might be looking for somebody that's proficient in English, but their customer base is not just going to be rooted in, say, the UK or the US. It's going to be a global customer base where they speak multiple languages. So I would really, the way I would look at this and look at job interviews, I would be going into it thinking, right, this is mine to, this is mine to lose. And I would go into that process and I would spin it to say, I speak, multiple languages, or I'm bilingual. So, I have really great experience at interacting with and engaging with, people from all kinds of backgrounds that are really going to help you shape, a first-class customer experience and drive revenue through your chatbot and your voice bot. And that's really how I would approach this.
Yeah, and I think a lot more companies are trying to localize and expand their experiences. And so actually, I'm seeing a lot more jobs that may be based anywhere, because right now we're in sort of like a remote work culture, but a lot of people want candidates who are bilingual.
Yeah, I agree. I think as well, like, it's not like, obviously it's not as it's harder to come by, but you may come across like the odd freelance gig as well. If for example, a company, especially like an agency company, is working with different, maybe they've just landed a client and it's a specific project based in, Latin America, for example, like the likelihood is they're going to need someone for the length of that project. Focused in that area. So yeah, it may be that to keep an eye out for like contract or short-term sort of gigs too.
Yeah, and actually one of the questions in the Q&A is about English not being a first language, but you can code. And so I think that's another thing where you might get opportunities to apply for different types of jobs because you have technical experience and you have, you're bilingual, or English is not your first language. This would be another way to sort of separate yourself from all of the other candidates and to apply for other types of roles, especially at contract roles, that they aren't necessarily super putting a lot of importance on English being your first language. All right, next question. What is expected, and we kind of answered this a little bit already, but just in case we have anything more to add, what is expected of the CV of a person with absolutely no experience that is looking to get into voice design? What makes this person's CV stand out?
Yeah, I think we've sort of covered this, but I would say like focus again, like try and focus on things, to try and think outside of the box. So don't just look at things like, I haven't worked in conversation design. Like really try and emphasize your transferable skills. Even perhaps if you're struggling, it might be worth like thinking about, for example, like in a previous role, if you've had a job previously in a different industry or doing something completely different, try and maybe put like a couple of bullet points or something brief in terms of picking out things that you've done in that job and how that could help you in conversation design, just so you're making it very, very personable. Like I always say, make sure you tailor every single application, so that includes your CV, to every job you apply for. So no two conversation design jobs will be the same. They might be similar, but the company is going to be different. They're going to have different things they're looking for. Research the company and look at what's important to them, and then emphasize on those on those points. So whether that's skills or hard skills, soft skills, whatever it may be, they may have like a team page on their website, and a lot, as I mentioned earlier, like a lot of companies talk about their values and mission and their culture as a company. So if you can look at those points and then emphasize that in your CV or application, whatever it is, I would say, like, yeah, try and focus on those things. Hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, what level of business development knowledge or expertise must one possess when applying for a job as a conversation designer?
Yeah, so I mean, I came from a SaaS sales background. I spent nearly 20 years in sales, and a lot of the sales leaders and sales teams I was a part of, the conversations were very transactional driven. They weren't focused on empathy and they weren't customer focused. So in my opinion, having no experience, having no business development experience, knowledge, is advantageous to you, because I think a lot of salespeople, they come with bad habits and baggage, which you then have to break. And the courses that are available out there that some of you might be taking in becoming a certified conversation designer. Like I just did one with the Conversation Design Institute, the fundamentals of conversation design. It teaches you everything you need to know to drive conversations forward in a very organic and natural way, which is the whole purpose of a conversation designer. So you don't have to have any sales or business development experience. As I said, I think, if you do, you probably got some bad habits, which will be harder to break.
Yeah. Okay, do you have any experience about what hard and soft skills are required to find a job as a conversation designer in Germany? What working experience is essential? So I think this would go for any country, not just Germany. But I think it would be, interesting to talk about what are the skills that you see as like an absolute requirement for people who are applying for these types of jobs.
Yeah, I think it's like less, as you mentioned, less focused around like specific countries and stuff. Like typically, they're going to be pretty much the same regardless of where the company is based or where you're based. It does really vary. So like, for example, we've worked with clients previously that require no previous experience whatsoever. Like they have capabilities in-house to fully train you, and they like that because they're able to bring you in and sort of like teach you on things like their way and get you up to speed with things. Other companies will like a bit of existing like knowledge or experience. So it's hard to say exactly what companies will look for because it will vary a lot, and also it will vary a lot in terms of the size of the company. So again, if they've got capabilities to train internally, like typically they want someone that's willing to learn, so being able to get that across in terms of like soft skills, being a team player, having strong communication. Like I know these all sound like basic things, but trying to emphasize on those points as soft skills. And what we're going to, and I think a plus, if you've got experience in conversation design, obviously that helps, but it's not always essential. So if you can demonstrate, again, if you don't have any experience, like try and demonstrate your own projects and stuff, like that will go a long way. And just try and like go that extra mile. So if you don't have any experience, like have a look into things. Maybe on the job spec the company mentions like what they use, so they may use Dialogflow, and perhaps you've never used Dialogflow, so have a little play around with it and try and get familiar so that you can say, look, like I don't actually have any experience, but I have been playing around with it and this is what I like, or this is just to show that you've actually like got an interest, a genuine interest, and you've taken that extra step. Because again, like companies will have various applications and things to look through, so you need to make sure that you're standing out from people even if they have experience, and really focusing on those soft skills. I don't know if you've got anything to add, Lee.
No, I wouldn't really. I would just echo what you said. So yeah. I haven't got anything different to add. You just do exactly what Alice said and look at,
Yeah, I have to agree with that too. Just do what Alice says.
Yeah, it's great advice.
Yeah, exactly. So this next one I'm going to skip because we already talked a lot about where beginners can look for jobs. And I know there's not a lot of opportunities right now for entry-level positions, but I think just keep your eye out and talk to people as much as you can as a way to sort of like get introduced to those opportunities when they do arise. So next question is about studying. So what is the best area that you would suggest for studying, to be a generalist or focus and be a specialist in something? And so I think this could come down to like what you're studying in school, or also when you're just are doing kind of like domain studying for like if you decide that you want to go full force into chat, if you want to go into voice, if you want to, be a more technical person, what's like the best sort of blend?
Yeah, I would say it's good to have a bit of a balance. Like you don't want to be too specific because then you're almost like pigeonholing yourself into a specific, for example, if you're just focusing on chat, like a lot of like agencies obviously are working across chat and voice, multimodal experiences. Like, yes, there are some companies that just specifically focus on like voice, for example, but like I think as it grows, and even companies that do maybe now focus just on voice, the likelihood is they probably or maybe the other way around, maybe they're on chat and looking into voice. So like I would say try and like have a bit of an understanding, or study both, but like get a good mix, because you don't want to like be stuck and looking for jobs and maybe you've just really worked, or you've just studied like chat based stuff, and then you keep seeing those of like VUI jobs or VUI designer jobs, and then you're like, oh crap, I don't have experience in that area. A lot of it's pretty similar in a way anyway, so the likelihood is you'll pick it up fairly easy. But yeah, when it comes to studying, I would say not to be too generalist, but not to be too specialist. So try and get a healthy mix, and like try and understand the industry in general. You don't have to be an expert, but like try and keep up to date with things that are maybe changes, like new technologies, or maybe tools that are coming out, just so you're aware of things and you're up to date. But yeah, a mix is healthy, I would say.
For sure. And one thing I want to add too, so I constantly am saying that I'm only a chat or like a text-based designer because I never have designed something for voice. And I do think that like the skills are a little bit transferable. But if you want to know how to design for voice and you are like me, I'm actually hosting an event at the end of this month with VoiceFlow where we're going to go through, I'm going to design my first voice app live on the stream. So if you want to learn along with me, I will put the link to that in the chat if you want to attend that event, as just a good way to sort of experiment and see how easy it is to actually learn these skills, and also a bit of the differences between designing for text and designing for voice. Next question. What would be your advice for getting more experience? How to get experience without actually having a job? I think we talked about this quite a bit too, but if there's any other like creative ways.
No, I was just going to say we have talked about this quite extensively, and I think Alice and yourself, Hillary, have both said this, and even me, just go out and build something, right? You might not have the experience, you might not feel like you have the knowledge, you might be taking courses, but that knowledge you won't really retain that, and it won't really sink in until you start building something, and then it'll all start to make sense. And Alice mentioned she built a project which failed. Well, it's better to try than to not try at all. That's my opinion. So I think you should just get out there and build something.
Yeah, I agree. Like I didn't do the project to like do it. I was basically done it because I thought, oh, I'll give it a go. But I learned so much, even though I didn't finish it. I learned so much along the way. So I learned what intents were. Like, yeah, I read about what intents and entities meant, but like when I actually started using them, I was like, oh, okay, it makes sense. Like to me, I'm quite I learn better by doing something. Other people I know learn better by reading things or looking up things. But I think, yeah, just like immerse yourself into it. Like try and get a good balance, especially if you are maybe already working, like just spend an hour or so, you don't have to be like, up all night try to create conversation flows, but like just try and dedicate, like even if it's 30 minutes every day, like just do it, and you'll be surprised how much you learn. And even without realizing it, then you'll probably have conversations with people, and as you're speaking you're like, oh, actually, yeah, maybe I do know what I'm talking about. So yeah, just immerse yourself into it.
Do it. Yeah, and I like, to be honest, that's how I learned. And while I had the advantage of like learning quite a few years ago, now there's the advantage of having all of these tools that make it super easy for you, and there's so many more resources, and they make it very approachable. And all of these tools sort of have different ways that you can practice, and they have live events where you can learn. And so there's so many ways out there to sort of get this experience. And then the more that you have the experience, the more years that you're adding on to your resume, you know? And so there's definitely a way to get into it. And I'll just say that like, that's what happened to me. I decided one day that I'm gonna start doing conversation design, and then I did it, and then I just kept doing it for years and years, and here I am. So it's definitely something that, you know, you can do. And I know that from personal experience.
And the only thing I would add, right, is you both touched upon building a personal brand. And if you're going to build something and you've not done it yet, I think you should share the journey, because, you know, if you create a blog or a vlog or even both, and you're sharing that journey, you know, you're making yourself very vulnerable. You become very, you know, genuine and authentic, and then you help others as well. So you're giving back to the community in a very selfless fashion, which is what we've touched upon.
Yeah, and to be honest, like, not to say that how selfless I am, but that's also what I did. So when I first got started in the industry, I was just writing blog posts and creating things, and created my Facebook group just to sort of talk about what I was doing, and also to meet other people who were doing it. And that's honestly like the way that a lot of you have found me, is because you like saw a post on LinkedIn or read my blog. And so there's a lot of ways that you can kind of put yourself out there. Like, you don't have to go build a voice app live like I'm going to do, but if you want to, you know, make a video on YouTube where you're talking about your experience or talking about your approach, and then you can use that in your website, or even if you want to, you know, make a LinkedIn post and say like, I just built my first bot, here's what I learned. Those are really, really good ways to sort of just start shaping your approach and shaping your experience. Okay, last question before we get to the ones in the Q&A box. So once a person lands a job as a conversation designer, what are some of the day-to-day responsibilities of the role? And this is more of a question for me, I think, as a person who is, you know, a conversation designer. So some of the day-to-day responsibilities, really, this is going to depend on your team structure. And what type of company are you working for? Are you working for an agency? Are you working for a tech company? Are you working for a platform like Facebook? Or are you working for, you know, a startup where you're trying to build your own technology? So that's really going to shape kind of what your day-to-day is, because for me, my day-to-day is part doing conversation design and then part doing like 100 other things. So there's no sort of like typical day. And then it really is going to depend on like if you're working with clients or if you are building your own projects. But I will say that like some of the day-to-day things that I'm doing is obviously, you know, writing conversations. So I am creating the scripts for the different experiences that I am designing for our clients. And that could be sort of creating this strategy and outlining like what this experience should look like. It could be actually sitting down to write the entire user journey. It could be looking at the existing experience and sort of seeing where are areas that we can improve. And so there's also sort of like that analysis aspect of it. I would say that like the writing is, you know, the majority of it. And then part of it is sort of this like strategic element where you are evaluating like, what do you want this approach to be? Why do you think that this is something you should be doing? And then communicating that back to whoever you are creating it for. And then seeing everything that happens afterwards. So once something is live in the world, the work is like kind of just starting. It's like a new phase and like a new chapter of what you're working on. And so you're going to be, you know, looking at all of your intents and saying, are we still seeing errors? How can we improve this? How can we change this? Or how can we train our models to know more? People are always getting tripped up in the same place. How can we reevaluate that? And then seeing if it's changing over time. And seeing if we're going to be doing advertising. Do we need to create new like ways into our experience that take that into account? So there's a lot of different, I would say, aspects of the job, which is why I like it so much. I think that it's sort of different every single place. Every single project is a little bit different, which is what makes it fun. So with that, we'll answer more of your questions. So we actually are right at time right now, but I would love if we can answer just a couple of these questions if you guys have like an extra 5 minutes.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. So there are 2 questions that are surrounding sort of like NLU and NLP. So what would you say in terms of like, do people need to know about like training AI models? Do they need to understand intents? Do they need to understand NLU? Do they need to understand sort of this language and these different vocabularies, or do they need to understand how to do it? Like, this is sort of a, I guess, technology adjacent skill, I would say, because it's not fully coding, but it is understanding a lot of technical aspects and a lot of sort of like functionalities of how a bot works.
Yeah, I agree. I think like, you know, it's not always, again, it's going to depend on the role and the company and stuff, but like typically it's not usually like a requirement. Like, you know, you won't see in a conversation design job ad like you must understand NLP and NLU. But again, going back to like one of the earlier questions about it, you know, needing technical experience, like no you don't, but understanding like the language. So yeah, you probably are going to come across intense or you're going to have conversations about it at least, again depending on what your role is. But having an understanding about that, and a lot of the tools out there where you don't need to be technical or code to use them to do what you're doing, will sort of like give you insights into that anyway, like some of that language. So yeah, you don't need typically to do it. I don't really see it, to be honest, in conversation design roles.
Yeah, and I would agree more or less. I think it's kind of something that you might get pulled into more than it's something that you have to start out with.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say the only thing that I think, you know, if you do understand NLU, NLP, it's just going to make you stand out from the other people in the interview process.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, we'll get to like two more, I think. So are there, and this is kind of like from a hiring manager or recruiter perspective, are you looking for people who have certifications, and are there recognized certifications or types of programs, even types of like majors in college that you are specifically looking for or that are going to be a plus? Are they a plus, or do they not really matter? How do you feel about all of those different types of courses?
Yeah, so like there are, and it's amazing, like there are a lot of different courses now. Like I think even compared to like a year ago, there's so many like in the last year that are coming up focused on conversation design, which is amazing. So yes, there's courses out there that you can do, and obviously if you've got that on your CV to say that you've got a certification in that, then obviously that's a big like tick, or you know, a big plus. But like you typically, just because of the way the industry is at the moment, and you know it's still being fairly early and things, like companies won't necessarily be like, you know, we won't consider you if you don't have a certification, just because, you know, everyone's very flexible and understands where the market or where the industry's at. Again, it depends on the company. Like companies will have different preferences. We've hired like voice designers that the company was really interested in, quite a wide background to be fair, but we were seeing a lot of like the candidates we were getting had like degrees within language, so that's always a great one. Typically we even had like, you know, journalist degrees. So it's again, you may not necessarily have to have a specific degree or anything like that, but you know, language is always one of a good one. And yeah, another role was completely the opposite in terms of more design focus. So they actually wanted someone, just because of the projects that they were working on, for someone to come from more of a design background. So perhaps a degree in design would be great. Again, it wasn't a deal breaker, but you know, that's fine. But it's not to say that you have to have that. Again, it will vary depending on the role itself and their specific requirements. But yeah, there are a lot of courses out there if you want to do it, because that will help. The CDI is a great one. I think that's really recognized in the space as a great certification to have. But there are like loads out there. Well, not loads, but there are quite a few out there that you can do. And I guess like it's worth seeing which ones offer like different things. So it might be that you do a couple. You know, some are more voice specific, some are more chat specific. So Yeah, I don't know if you have anything to add on that.
Yeah, I mean, there are tons. I also have my own course, which is focused on chatbots. And then there's like more Voice Tech Global, which focus like specifically on voice. Conversation Design Institute, they have quite a few different courses. They have an AI trainer course, which I really want to take, that is going to teach you more about that, in addition to like conversation design, conversational copywriting. There's Digital Assistant Academy. There's the voice course. There's like so many. So I totally agree. I know a lot of people who have taken my course have also taken several other courses. And until we get to a place, I think, where there's like a degree in it, I think that it's a really good way to sort of think of it as you're doing extra studying for something that you're going to be doing. Okay, two more questions. So one is, what types of new positions are you seeing arise in conversation design, or I think in conversational AI in general, maybe? Aside from like product owners or team leads, what other types of roles can people grow into in their career aside from just like conversation design, getting your first job?
I would say in the last year, like conversation design roles have really started to kick off. I don't know if you both agree, but like from like just comparing it to a year ago, like when you used to say conversation design, no one really knew what you were talking about. Now, you know, you do actually see a couple of job ads out there with it. So I don't know if it's like, if it's, you know, soon enough to be talking about potential new positions. I think like organically and naturally, like, you know, there are going to be new positions that crop up. Yes, like we see product owners and maybe not so much team leads, but like, you know, conversation design manager roles, because it's now getting to that point. But yeah, I'm interested to see what you guys think in terms of maybe any specific roles around that. I'm not sure surrounding conversation, like maybe going into other elements of the business, and maybe still, you know, being focused on conversational AI, but I'm not sure in terms of surrounding conversation design.
Yeah, I mean, what I've seen is just, you know, like you just said already, Alice, is the senior conversation design role, or you know, a management role of a small team. You know, beyond that, I think, like you said, you're looking to maybe move laterally into a different role within conversational AI.
It may be that like you get more involved in like the strategy and vision and side of things, rather than like, obviously you'd still be involved in conversation design, but it just means that, you know, depending on the company and where they're at, it may be that they start needing to look for people that are going to become, you know, a bit more forward thinking in terms of like strategy around conversation design and their vision for the company. So it may be that you can get involved on that side of things.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is I think it's going to be strategy. I think strategy will be sort of like the next role we see kind of emerge. And I agree with you. Like, I don't think that we're going to see different really types of conversation design. You know, obviously there's like senior conversation designer or like head of conversation design, but I think we're just going to see more of those sort of lateral roles of strategist, of, you know, AI training, of those sorts of specialty roles that right now we are still like very new in this space, and people don't necessarily know that they need all of those roles. And so even as like when I first started in conversation design, no one knew what it was, and there still were a lot of experiences being built and they just weren't using a conversation designer. Now the companies are sort of backtracking and adding them. And I think that that's going to happen again, where people will sort of say, we need someone who can look at the overarching goals of this. Like, why the heck are we doing this in the first place? And right now that role is kind of split between like the team lead, the conversation designer, and then like the technical person who's saying what is and isn't possible. Last question is, wait, I just lost it. What would you say are the best questions to ask in an interview when you are with the head of conversation design or the hiring manager or whatever? What are any ways that you can sort of say the best questions to ask as a person who is interviewing?
No, go on.
Well, for me, I would just focus on, you know, what are their goals? You know, what get to the heart of the problem that they're looking to solve. right? So however you want to position or frame that question, you know, what is your biggest frustration today in terms of your chatbot app, your voice bot app, your customer experience, you know, so that's what I would focus on, right? I'd really want to drill down and uncover, you know, what problem they're looking to solve. And then once I've identified that problem, I'd probably want to, I hate to use cliche terms, but kind of double down and just really understand, you know, why they're focused and what their priority is in terms of that problem. And it'll show that you are, you know, thinking about the customer first and how you can improve the journey, which is what this world is all about, really.
Yeah. What do you think?
I didn't know if I read the question right. I wasn't sure whether it's asked what you should ask the.
So when you're the candidate, what should you ask?
Okay, so if you were asking like the panel in terms of the
so question. If someone was asking, if you were interviewing someone, what questions should they ask you?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So yeah, I think that, like, especially if you're getting interviewed by like the head of conversation design or someone that's, you know, rather than like the HR manager, is probably going to vary the sort of questions that you would ask. But like if you're being interviewed by, like, you know, the conversation design manager or whoever it is, I would try and like ask them a bit about their own experiences, like you know, try and get to know them and show an interest into maybe like how they got into the space, or you know, how they're finding it, what their job entails, and just try and show some interest and ask some questions based around that. Like there are a lot of different questions you'll be able to ask, and obviously it would depend on, you know, what you're discussing, what the role is. Maybe you want to understand where the company's going, maybe what like future projects might be in the pipeline. Say for example, they're just working on like chat or messaging, like maybe ask if they're thinking about getting into voice and have a discussion about that, just to show that you you know, not know what you're talking about, because, you know, you might not always know, but like show an interest and just have a discussion. It may not be specific questions. Like obviously you should always do research on a company anyway, and you're likely to have questions based around that, which are going to vary. But yeah, I would say to show some interest and ask some questions about them personally, and stuff like that.
Awesome. Well, that is all that we have time for. I really appreciate you guys sticking on past the time. We were talking beforehand that we thought that this would go over, and it did go over. But I just want to thank all of you guys for attending. I especially want to thank Alice and Leigh for joining us and letting me just drill you guys with questions for a really, really long time. And yeah, I guess let people know where they can find you too, if they want to chat more with you about roles that you're hiring for or their experience.
Yeah. Just on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
That's the easiest way.
Yeah, find us all on LinkedIn, and we will chat more, and hopefully you will all be finding your first job very soon.
Yeah. Thank you, Hillary.
All right. Yeah, thank you guys.
Take care.
Bye-bye.